Good evening and welcome to the August 23rd meeting of the Murfreesboro City School Board. We're glad to have those of you that are with us tonight. We're glad to have those that are watching from home. At this time, I'm going to ask you to please stand as we have two of our students, Ollie Young, a 5th grade student at Northfield, and Annabelle Millette, a 2nd grade student at John Pittard, to lead us in our pledge, followed then by our moment of silence. And now our pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now our moment of silence. Thank you.
I need to phone them if they're cleaning people.
All right, board members, you have seen a copy of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as printed?
So moved. We practiced that.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Goff, and second by Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you very much. All right, communications. Ms. Trail?
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I have a few communications, and I know we have a long agenda, so I'll go quickly through them. Mitchell Nielsen would like to thank Third Baptist Church for celebrating our teachers and staff at their annual back-to-school lunch. They held it this year at Barfield Park. We appreciate all of the work that Third Baptist does for us. Bradley Academy is hosting a series of listening sessions and invites the community to join them for their feedback. 2 more listening sessions are scheduled for August 25th at 6 p.m. at Patterson Park, and then August 30th at 5 p.m. at the school. The City Schools Foundation Back to School Dash and the 9/11 Heroes Run is Saturday, September 10th, 8 a.m. for a start if you want to run in that 5K. The fun run will start a little bit after that, so probably about 8:15. We're looking for runners and volunteers. If you want to run, you're welcome to run. If you want to volunteer, let me know, and we will sign you up at a place that you'll just love, I'm sure. We are thrilled that we're joining forces this year. Speaking of the foundation, the grant cycle has opened and will stay open through the middle of September for our teachers to apply for those grants that the City Schools Foundation gives each fall. Reading in the Schools Day is scheduled for September 16th. I know this is something that y'all like to put on your calendar, so we would love to see you in our schools on the 16th. Just work with our librarians to get on their schedule. Mark your calendar also for Thursday, September the 22nd at 8 a.m. Murfreesboro City Schools is hosting a Community State of the Schools program at Redstone Federal Credit Union. We thank Redstone for being the sponsor of this event. Also, thank you to the volunteers at United Way. Because of them and their service to us, we received hundreds, thousands of school supplies. Most of those have already been distributed to the schools, but we still have plenty. But because of United Way, churches, nonprofits across our city, every child was able to start school with some new pencils and paper and backpacks and anything they needed, including some uniforms. So we do appreciate our community for that. Finally, the City Schools Foundation would like to recognize, and I will ask him to join us next time, but we'd like to recognize and congratulate our past board chair, Travis Lampley, on his successful bid for juvenile court judge. Travis does have to step down as soon as he is sworn in as a judge, but he has served as our chair for the past 3 years. David Scott is our chair now, but I do want to take the opportunity to thank Travis for his work for the foundation. That's all of my communications, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Wonderful report. Dr. Duke, swearing in of our new board members.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Campbell and board. It is definitely a bittersweet night for us tonight as we welcome our new board members to be sworn in and say goodbye to our outgoing board members. But Chairman, I am pleased to welcome Mayor Shane McFarland to the meeting tonight as he swears in our newest board members, Mrs. Barbara Long and Miss Karen Dodd. So I'm going to ask both of them to join the mayor at the podium, as well as Miss Amanda Moore, who is being sworn in for her second term tonight.
It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I do want to
tell Becky and Roseanne, I want to thank y'all for your service, the entire board for your service. You know, being an elected official is not easy. Being an elected official over the last 2 years has definitely not been easy. It's easy to second guess any decision that any board or council has to make, and I've learned over these last 2 years specifically that we're not in control of everything. And so I want to thank y'all for your hard work, for your steadfast leadership, and most importantly, I'm the nerd who watches all y'all's meetings, and there's never been a moment that I question anyone's heart and what y'all try to do for our city. So thank y'all very much. It's my pleasure to be able to swear in two new members and one returning member. If you will, Amanda, Karen, Barbara, if you'll raise your right hand. And just repeat after me. In accordance with Section 25-5 of the Murfreesboro City Code, I do solemnly swear that I will support the constitutions of the state of Tennessee and the United States and the acts constituting the charter of the city of Murfreesboro, and that I will faithfully, zealously, and impartially discharge the duties of a member of the Murfreesboro City School Board of the city of Murfreesboro without fear, favor, and for the public welfare. Congratulations.
I would like to take just a moment. Yesterday afternoon, we had a session of orientation, I guess, with our two new board members, and I want to personally thank Dr. Duke, Ralph Ringstaff, Sherry Arnett, Lisa Van Cleve, Lisa Trejo, Kim Williams, and also Elizabeth for being there and doing such a wonderful job in organizing an organizational meeting and indoctrination for these two new board members. They did a fabulous job. It lasted a long time, but we went through a lot of material, and I'll have to say I was very proud just to sit there and listen to those people make their comments and instructions on what they do and what we do in Murfreesboro City Schools. So thank you very much for that. Dr. Duke?
Yes, sir. Tonight, I'm also pleased to officially welcome Ms. Sonia Cox to the meeting. So, Ms. Cox, I'm going to ask you to come up. Ms. Cox has been named the principal of Case and Lane Academy. She was actually named back in July, but this is our first opportunity to formally introduce her to the board. Sonia has served successfully in the role as the assistant principal of Case and Lane for the past 3 years. Prior to that, she served as the instructional coach at Irma Siegel for 3 years. She also has previous experience as an instructional coach, teacher of gifted students, and an elementary school teacher. She is off to a fantastic start to this school year, and we know she's going to continue the long history of excellence for our Case and Lane team, so we wanted to formally introduce her to the board tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm incredibly honored to be able to serve as a leader at Case and Lane Academy, and we just look forward to continuing the vision that we've had over the past few years. We look forward to growing and learning together, and at Case and Lane, we always say we're charged up and ready to go, so that's how we are. We're charged up and ready to go for a great year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion to approve the consent items on the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Any questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you very much. Action items.
I'm going to come down to the podium for this one, and I'm going to ask Ms. Goff and Ms. Barton to join me at the podium as well tonight. So, the first item we have on our agenda for voting tonight is regarding our two outgoing board members. So, Chairman Campbell and board, I am pleased to present for your approval 2 resolutions to the board tonight. These resolutions recognize the dedication and work of our 2 outgoing board members, Ms. Roseanne Barton and Ms. Becky Goff. and they enshrine in our city's public record the service they have provided to our students, to our employees, and to our school system. These resolutions outline the tremendous work done during their terms. This includes the opening of Salem Elementary, the search and employment of a new director of schools after the sudden passing of Dr. Gilbert, the leading of the district through the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. Furthermore, it outlines the role that both have played in ensuring our district has a strong future ahead of us by working to create and approve our new 5-year district plan. Ms. Barton, your resolution also speaks to your voice in advocating for all students to have access to high-quality instructional materials, ensuring our nurses receive the recognition and compensation they deserve for their Herculean efforts, and ensuring our English language learner subgroup have the supports they need to achieve success. Ms. Goff, your resolution speaks to your advocacy as an effective proponent of using legislative actions to champion public education and advance the position of both the board and the school district. It also talks about ensuring all of our students have a safe and encouraging learning environment, and for your focus on listening to our teachers who are the closest to the center of our work. Both resolutions speak to their work in creating positive, open avenues of communications among our teachers, support staff, and administrator. Finally, these resolutions clearly state that our city has been fortunate to have such devoted and dedicated individuals serving the best interest of the children of Murfreesboro. Mr. Chairman, we wholeheartedly recommend approval of the proposed resolutions.
Do we have a motion to approve the resolutions?
So moved, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Ms. Rickman.
Second.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. All in favor say aye, aye.
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 Thank you very much. You have been integral parts of this board for the last several years. All right, Dr. Duke, you have a capital improvement plan you want to talk about?
Yes, sir. Tonight we are pleased to present a capital improvement plan to the board for approval. Our capital improvement plan outlines projects and major purchases over the next 5 years and will be revised each year based on current needs. Our staff at the central office will use the board-approved plan as we work with the city of Murfreesboro to address capital projects. As a board, you are aware that we have reviewed this at our last work session, and I will say there are no major changes found on the final copy. However, we have updated based on some feedback. Additionally, as the board is aware, the 5-year plan does include the need for a new school on the west side of town to address the growth at Overall Creek, Salem Elementary, and Scales Elementary. Our target open date for this facility would be no later than August 2025. We are recommending approval, and we are happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Do we have a motion to approve the capital improvement?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Any discussion or comment?
I have
Ms.
some.
Moore?
Thank you. As Dr. Duke said, we did review this in our session, and this was an update to something we had looked at last year, and we did have to make some changes from things we thought would be on our 5-year plan based on just the increasing costs of things and how we could use our money. I'm not opposed to this new plan. I plan to vote for it, but I do want to say, just to encourage Dr. Duke, if you could ask the staff to look at one of the things we had to pull from that, and that was redoing the entrance to Reeves Rogers. I think it's our oldest building, and it really could use some updates for a number of reasons, for safety and just for, I don't know, the spirit of the school. I just hate to see building brand new schools, which we obviously need, but letting the conditions of our old schools just kind of sit because of lack of funds. So if there's any way for next year's plan that we could get that back in, I would really like to see that happen.
And I thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Moore. And I will say, I think, obviously, as the board knows, our goal was to use ESSER 3 funding to help fund that because with the new nursing clinic in that as well. And as Ms. Moore and we've talked about, mentioned the prices of the other projects that were more considered immediate, specifically the HVACs came in so much higher than we had originally anticipated, which is why we removed that. But I absolutely agree with that comment, and we will, as a staff, go back and continue to work to see how we can make sure what we can do to bring that back to the board.
Thank you.
Ms. Barton?
I realize I have a limited amount of power at this point, but I just would like to reiterate what Amanda said. Obviously, Reeves Rogers is near and dear to my heart, but it's more than just a facelift. I think sometimes the older schools feel left out because they don't have as much, they don't get as much. And you know what, they get what they have to have, but, and I'm not saying this is strictly aesthetic, it certainly isn't. There can be so many improvements in a larger front area for them, but just kind of piggybacking on Amanda, saying yes, I would also love for that to happen.
I think there is intent to develop a plan for that. We couldn't use some of the ESSER monies, but we're hopefully looking for other financial support to get that done as well. I think we all will agree to that.
And I will say from a staff perspective, that was one of the first things we began looking at, even before I came on the board, was how could we use some of those funds to help address that need. And so we will continue to look at that, and we will definitely bring something back to the board, hopefully much sooner than next year's capital improvement plan, with a plan of what we can do to help address some of this.
Mr. Ballard?
Will that include a requote for these items?
So, I'm sorry, can you?
There's several items on here that were coming in at a much higher price than what you anticipated. And if we want to do the Reeves Rogers or pull it ahead, maybe there's a way to requote some of this and loosen up some funds.
And everything that's in the capital improvement plan you're voting on tonight has been requoted since the one you saw last year. But we will also have to get another quote for the Reeves Roger project, because my assumption is, just as everything else went up, that will also have gone up. So that's something we will look at. And again, our intent with the 5-year plan, as you know, is every year we look at it to see what funds are available, what we need to request from the city and go to the city for, and address those immediate needs.
All right, we've had discussion. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the capital improvement plan, simply say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, board policy 2.804.
Yes, sir. We actually have several board policies we're updating tonight. Many of these have to do with new laws that were passed in the General Assembly. We did not meet in July, and so some of these are now being done, and while we have a few of them. The first one actually does not apply to that, though. Policy 2.804 outlines our expense and reimbursement guidelines. These changes are being recommended by the Finance Director to ensure that travel expenses are properly documented and to update the reimbursement procedure. This recommendation also includes changes to the pooled fund section for board member travel to better match practices that are currently within the district and to align reimbursement procedures for board members and district staff. And we are recommending approval as presented.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move for approval.
Thank you, sir. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Will you define the pooled fund section?
Under the current policy, it talks about the board each year determining a set amount of funds to be set aside specifically for board member travel, and that there's application for that. The practices we've really moved to now is making sure our budget includes enough to cover all of the TSBA conferences and so on. So there's not a need currently to continue to determine and board members apply for funds, because we make sure we put enough for our board members to travel to those TSBA conferences and conventions.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve policy 2.804. Do we have all in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, 2.806, bids and quotations.
Public Chapter 1016, which was passed during the last General Assembly, allows for school boards to increase their bidding threshold from $25,000 to $50,000 if the district has a centralized purchasing authority with a full-time purchasing agent, and if the board votes to increase this limit. We are recommending that the board accept this amendment to increase the bidding threshold from $25,000 to $50,000.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move for approval.
Thank you, sir. We have a second.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Any question or comment? Mr. Ballard?
Sorry, I've got another question regarding quotations. It says in section on line 9 through 12, it speaks to the lowest and/or the best bid shall be accepted. What are the, and maybe that takes somebody from purchasing to explain that, but that seems pretty wide open. Lowest or the best?
So historically, we go with the lowest bid, and I'll defer to Ms. Williams if she wants to add to this. But one reason we may not go with the lowest would be if there is some reason, perhaps we've had previous dealings or experiences with that company that we feel like it would be better to not go with that lowest bid. Anything you'd like to add to that, Ms. Williams?
Could that also be the quality of the material?
Yes, Mr. Campbell, it could be the quality of the material, and even such items as school uniforms. It's even come up as true colors, colors that are true to a specific school. It could be past dealings that we've had with a vendor, favorable or unfavorable. And so there are other things other than cost that we would consider, especially in a quote or a formal bid. And we also have the option to do requests for proposals. So there are many options to get the best possible quote, price, and the professional service. But True Colors, that's the first one that comes to mind. And
So it could be considered best lowest bid.
it's best, yes. It's usually, this says and/or, it's lowest and best. And so just to let you know that price alone is not always the only indicator of the quality of the product or service or the customer service that we've had with a specific vendor.
And this language here would give us a little more latitude in being able to comport what it is we need with what's being offered or bid. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. And $50,000, the bid threshold has gradually increased over the last 15, 20 years, from $10,000 to $25,000 and now $50,000 for a sealed competitive bid, as long as we have the correct purchasing criteria, which we do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve policy 2.806, bids and quotations.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Suttles. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Board policy 3.202.
Still second.
What?
Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Yes,
Give me a rough time tonight.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Campbell.
Not at all.
Board Policy 3.202
I know.
actually works with the new law that was passed in the General Assembly last year. One of the laws that was passed in the General Assembly allows school districts, if needed, in the case of a severe outbreak of illness, that we could move the district to virtual for 2 days per semester and it not count against our 180-day requirement. So that is now allowable within the law. Now, I've been very clear, our hope is that we never have to do that, but we do have that latitude should they need it. 2 per semester.
Per semester.
Per semester to move to virtual learning. So this policy supports that. It actually falls under our emergency preparedness one, and it says that school districts are now required to conduct at least 1 virtual learning drill each year per chapter, public chapter 936. A virtual learning drill would be to ensure that students have practiced what they are to do should the district ever have to move to a virtual environment, and we've updated our policy to reflect this requirement in the law.
Do we have a motion to approve policy 3.202?
I make a motion that we do.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Any question or comment?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there a fiscal note or a cost associated with those trainings that maybe would take away from the other learning experiences throughout the year?
No, sir. We would do it much like we do a fire drill, a tornado drill, build it into our schedule. Ms. Zavisa and her team will work to make sure we can prepare that for teachers so it's as pretty seamless as possible.
Very well. Thank you, Dr. Duke. Mr. Chairman.
Any other question or comment?
I have a question. So this is an in-school thing. It's not like do the students have to practice taking home their laptop? This is so strange. I've never heard of a drill quite like this. I know what to do on a fire drill, and unfortunately, I know what to do on a tornado drill. I hated those. But
So most likely this would look like, and we're still developing that, us making sure we build time to meet the requirement of the law, that we're building time throughout at some point during this year to say, okay, we're going to make sure every student knows this is what you need to log into. You need to make sure you're communicating with your teacher. Here's how you do that. Okay. So if that happens and we have to move virtually, we're not trying to push information out to students and parents.
so it's not a bottleneck.
No, sir.
Clog. All right. I understand it better.
All right.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, policy 4.101, instructional standards.
Yes, sir. We've updated policy 4.101 to notify stakeholders that complaints regarding violations to Tennessee Code annotated 49-1-302, which of course is regarding the teaching of prohibited concepts, are required to comply with the complaint process outlined by the Tennessee Department of Education's temporary emergency rule. We may need to go back and amend this policy again after the department implements a permanent rule. So once they do that, we will make those recommended changes. But this policy right now just specifies that if they have a complaint to make regarding the prohibited concepts law, that they would do that in conjunction with the state board.
We have a motion to approve policy 4.101.
So approved.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. Any question or comment? I see none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Policy 4.400.
Policy 4.400 contains our district's procedures for handling complaints regarding textbooks and instructional materials. This amendment adds language in response to a new public chapter 1085, which was passed during the last General Assembly. This new legal requirement prohibits the use of textbooks or instructional materials created to align exclusively with Common Core state standards or that are marketed as Common Core textbooks or materials. And we recommend approval based on the new law.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve policy 4.400.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Any question or comment?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Duke, the textbooks that we currently use in our system, are they in line with what the state of Tennessee has said we should use and need to use?
Yes, sir.
That was my only question.
See no other questions. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Policy 4.403.
This is actually a brand new policy that we're adding to our policy manual. As you are very aware, Public Chapter 744, known as the Age Appropriate Materials Act, creates a new requirement for school boards. This act requires that school districts first maintain and post online a current list of material in their school's library collection, and two, adopt a policy for developing and reviewing the school library collection. This required policy must contain procedures for developing a library collection, receiving and evaluating feedback, and periodically reviewing the collection to ensure that it contains materials appropriate to the age and maturity levels of the students who may access them. We are recommending approval of this policy based on our new state law.
We have a motion to approve policy 4.403.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Now, any question or comment? All right, Mr. Settles.
Stand in line.
Mr. Duke, currently, how do we curate our collection at our schools for the libraries?
Our library media specialists do that job.
So each school independently, is there a set of guidelines or rules that we already adhere to, or do I just kind of look online and see what's delicious? Or, I mean, how does it work?
I'm going to ask Ms. Arnett to come to the podium as well.
I figured we'd get to hear from her
I
tonight.
will tell you that we work very closely with Follett, and that's, of course, the organization that works with libraries across the state. And they, for instance, I'll give you a great example. When we went to Open Salem, we actually worked with them, and they make recommendations, as well as here are the common books that you would find for this age group in school libraries based on most purchased books and things like that. But so we work with Follett with that, but our library media specialist ultimately work to select the books that go into our library, and I'll turn that over to Ms. Arnett.
So yes, just to follow up with what Dr. Duke said, the librarians do inventory the books every year through Follett, which is our cataloging system. And then when they purchase new books, that's done, you know, as they weed library books out, they replace through their library funds with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barton?
Obviously, I'm sure a lot of us have had some feedback about this from teachers. And the thing that I would like to recognize is that I don't know that it is, of course, partly the time it will take, but it's also, I think, the thought that teachers don't feel like they're being trusted, that they would put something in their classrooms that's inappropriate, and they're insulted by that insinuation. So I don't want anybody to think it's as much about, I don't think it is as much about the work or the time it's going to take, is the fact that how, you know, why would anybody ever think that? So.
Mr. Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Ms. Taylor, what would be the effect if the board did not adopt this policy?
Oh, I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah,
This is a law, and the law states that the board must adopt a policy regarding this. Let me review. I mean, I guess it could be a potential lawsuit, an injunction. Someone could file a lawsuit against the board, and so the court would have to mandate that the board adopt a policy as the law requires.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
So according to the law, we really don't have a choice.
Yes, the law says that by the 2022-2023 school year, each local board of education shall adopt a policy for developing and reviewing school library collections.
So,
Ms. Moore?
I was just wondering where the language came from for this. Is this a recommended TSBA policy, or do we write it, or do we tweak theirs?
This is TSBA's recommended policy.
I have to say, as much as I'm frustrated by this thing just on a base level and what it represents, the end part of the instruction to the media review committee that this does establish, I feel pretty comfortable with those instructions, which I can share some of those. Base decisions on the principle of freedom to learn rather than on the defense of specific items of library material. Freedom of inquiry is vital to education in a democratic society. So it's points like that to use as a guide when someone does have to review this. And so I actually feel okay with those, even though I'm just fundamentally frustrated by this.
And that part is ours, now that you mentioned it. Yeah, that if you look, we do have a policy that governs reconsideration of textbooks and instructional materials, and it's the same
We
procedure.
took that language, okay.
Well, then good job, Elizabeth.
excellent.
I like it.
Sherry and her staff.
Sherry?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
All right, other questions, comments?
Well, this addresses then the library, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in the library room.
So our interpretation of the law, as well as guidance, explicit guidance from the State Department, have said that this law does apply not just to school libraries, but also to free libraries and classrooms where students have free access to select books. And the language used by the state is that the law is not about a physical location in the building. It is about if a school is going to post what's in their library, their physical library, then the transparency of that also applies to the classroom libraries as well. So that is how both our legal authority and the state have confirmed.
And I remember having a discussion when we were in the work session concerning I think maybe they're called the little free libraries that are located sometimes close to the schools. This does not necessarily cover those, is that correct?
So, Ms. Taylor, I'll let you answer that about community libraries.
Yes, community libraries are open to anyone in the community, not limited to Murfreesboro City School students, so parents, Rutherford County School students, students that go to private schools, students that live in Nashville that just happen to be driving by one of our schools could get one of those books. So based on that, that would not be a school library, because it's not necessarily a library for students of Murfreesboro City Schools. Anyone has access to it.
And we are not obliged to, for lack of a better term, police that,
Correct.
correct? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I find this to be yet another unfunded mandate from the larger level governmental entity, and I'll abstain from this vote.
Okay. Any other question or comment? All right, all in favor of the policy, please say aye.
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 Any opposition?
Abstain.
All right, sir, thank you, and the motion passes. Policy 4.400.
I think we're on 4.406, sir. Make sure I have my notes pulled up. We have updated policy 4.406 to align with the requirements of Public Chapter 1002, which was passed in the last General Assembly. This new law requires boards to have a policy in place regarding complaints about how vendors provide access to online content. The law requires districts to have a policy specifically allowing these complaints and state how they are handled, and we are recommending approval based on the requirements of the law.
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Any question or comment? I see none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Policy 5.106.
5.106 outlines the procedure when teachers anticipate receiving advanced degrees or academic credentials. These changes are being recommended by our Human Resources Department to help teachers better understand the deadlines and requirements specifically to reach the Master's Plus 30 status. Mr. Ringstaff and his team recommended these changes this year. There are fewer and fewer districts that are still offering that Master's Plus 30 pay lane that we offer, and this is to help better clarify who's eligible for that.
All right, we have a motion to approve policy 5.106.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Settle, we have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gobb. Now, question or comment? I see none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Policy 5.1061.
This is also a new policy. As the board's aware, the General Assembly passed Public Chapter 821 during the last legislative session. This new act allows for an additional option for the employment of retirees to fill open teaching position. To clarify the options for employing retirees, we have created this new policy to govern this, and we are recommending approval.
We have a motion to approve policy 5.1061.
So moved.
Thank you. And have a second.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry, question or comment?
I have a question.
All right, sir.
Ms. Taylor, how many laws concerning education came out of the General Assembly for this last session?
Too many.
This is the most. I'm, 6 years in? 6 years in, I have never seen the General Assembly so concerned that they've passed so many laws in such minutia for school boards. Is this a record? And maybe you don't know, but I feel like it's a record.
I don't know, but on the Secretary of State's website, I'm just scrolling really quickly, there's probably at least 20.
666?
But if you'd like that number, I can parse through and find out.
Just wonder.
There's several.
Yeah, they were, some of, admittedly, yes. Admittedly. Some of those that finally got passed should have been passed a while back. And then we just got a whole bunch of other stuff that is interesting.
Well, I think this policy outlines what a retired teacher can do as far as going back to work if they want to, and what their compensation will be. Whether we agree with it or not, it's the law.
There is a teacher shortage.
There is a teacher shortage. I'm in
That's
support of
why
that.
they did.
Absolutely. And it's really not specific to this. This just happened to be the one that caught my attention the most. I mean, I've never seen so many laws come out of General Assembly until this year that concerns education and boards of education. When boards of education are locally elected, to kind of oversee the education in the local area. So it was just interesting to me how many we've actually had to come out of the session. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not sorry.
Ms. Moore?
Just to add to that, that it is interesting that so many are about this with our teacher shortage, while at the same time, so many are doing things like Ms. Barton pointed out, which would actually, I think, contribute to the teacher shortage and make education a very unattractive field to go into or remain in. So it's a very frustrating thing to have two messages coming from the state legislature.
There seems to be a great interest in education at the state level.
There what?
Absolutely.
There seems to be a great interest in education at the state level.
I agree. And it ain't all about testing.
No, it is not.
And I'm not too sure that showing the most interest know enough about it to be interested.
I'll second that.
I'll go back. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition, and there is none. Thank you. All right, policy 5.200.
Yes, sir. This actually involves policy 5.200, 5.201, and 5.701. All three of these contain language regarding the employment of retired teachers. Because we have approved the new policy, 5.701, we are removing the retiree section from these other policies to better streamline and provide clarity around the employment of retired teachers. And I do want to point out, especially the conversation on the teacher shortage, as Ms. Barton alluded to, this is one that has been good for us for sure. Currently, we have, I think, and I'm looking to Ms. Johnson, Ms. Ringsack, yeah, we have 3 retired teachers who have come back to fill teaching positions for us this year under this new under this new provision, which has been fantastic for us.
All right, we have a motion.
I move for approval.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Any question or comment? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition, and there is none. Thank you. Policy 6.318.
Yes, sir. Previously, state law required that the Commissioner of Education be notified if a district denied enrollment to a student who was suspended or expelled from another school district. Public Chapter 686, which was passed during the last legislative session, removes that notification requirement, and Policy 6.318 has been updated to reflect this change.
I move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Have a second. Now, any question or comment? I see none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you. 6.409, child neglect.
Yes, sir. And for this one, I want to pause for a minute and kind of take a look back. A few years ago, there was a law passed that said every school must have a child abuse coordinator. And when we make referrals to DCS, that it goes through that child abuse coordinator. This policy addresses a change in that, and there's actually 2 changes. First, Public Chapter 841 narrowed the category of individuals who must receive training on child abuse. In the past, it said all school personnel, but moving forward, it only required for employees who actually work with students to receive that training. But the part that's the new part of the policy to address the previous one was that this new policy, because of the new law, says if the complaint is being made against someone else at the school, it does not necessarily have to go through the child abuse coordinator. The employee should call DCS directly, is what the law says. And again, that's to prevent someone who may not want to report because the person they reporting works in the same place as the child abuse coordinator.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the policy.
Thank you,
Second.
sir. Have a second. All right. I guess I'm confused with my narrow mind tonight. Say what you said one more time. Let me see if I can digest it.
Previously, the law recently was changed to say that each school had to appoint a child abuse coordinator. And anytime we made a referral to DCS regarding abuse, it went through that coordinator at the school level, and they were involved in that reporting process. So the teacher would still do the reporting, but the child abuse coordinator was involved as well. This removes that requirement if the complaint being made is against someone who is at the school level.
I got you. Okay. All right. Now I understand. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you. All right, approval of the Extended School Advisory Board.
Yes, sir. As a recipient of the 21st Century Community Center Learning Grant funding, our ESP program is required to have a parent advisory board. This board meets twice per year, once in the fall and once in the spring, to gather feedback. Our extended school program values the opinions of our families and strives to align the program with those desires, and we are seeking approval for the members presented to you to serve on the ESP advisory board.
Do we have a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
the recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. And a second by Ms. Barton. Any question or comments?
Good-looking board.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you. Pre-K Advisory Council.
Yes, sir. This is the second of 3 boards we're going to ask you to approve tonight as part of our annual agenda. The purpose of the Preschool Advisory Board is to provide the opportunity for collaboration between Murfreesboro City Schools preschool program and community partners in efforts to ensure a high-quality preschool program and to inform and support the program decisions. That includes both the enrollment and the recruitment process. This council includes, but is not limited to, members representing local school board, parents, teachers. We have nonprofit providers, for-profit providers, Head Start representatives, our business community, and local government. The council meets twice a year, and documentation of the council's proceedings is maintained. This team is required to receive our pre-K funds, and we're seeking board approval for the board or the community advisory council that's being presented.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the advisory council?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. Any question or comment?
Question.
All right, sir.
Is that a vacancy still for a parent?
Yes, sir. There is still a parent, and that specifically will be chosen once we finish
Once
the
the-
enrollment process
Gotcha.
of all of our pre-K students.
That's my question.
All right, all in favor of the advisory council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you. Family Resource Center Advisory Board.
Our final board for approval for this school year is our Family Resource Center Advisory Board. Murfreesboro City Schools is required to develop this council. The Family Resource Center Advisory Council serves as a guiding body to support the Family Resource Center programming. This diverse council works with our FRC director to provide input and ensure the effectiveness of the programs that we're offering at the Family Resource Center, and they also meet twice a year.
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Suttles. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Any question or comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And I see none. Thank you. While we're talking about these advisory councils, I'm going to ask the board members, along with Ms. Barton and Ms. Goff, if you will please send to me the boards or committees that you serve on presently, and also please indicate, those of you that will be returning, whether or not you want to continue to serve on that, because we will be making committee and advisory council appointments here as soon as our new board members come on board. Okay, thank you. Field trips.
Yes, sir. As we know, Board Policy 6.709 states that prior to the start of the year, the board approves all known student fees for the upcoming school year, with additional fees approved during the year as needed. Historically, we have treated field trips under the during the year as needed phase, which means, as you guys know, each meeting under the consent agenda, we would approve individual field trips throughout the year. We are actually recommending that the board move forward with pre-approving student field trips up to $20 per student for the upcoming school year. This pre-approval will decrease our turnaround time and allow schools to begin collecting funds immediately when planning for a standard field trip. Field trips beyond that $20 limit per student would still be approved individually at the board level at each meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
I
Mr.
second.
Sutton.
This is,
Have a second by Ms. Barton. Any question or comment?
thank you. Thank you. This is such a needed streamlining of
All in
resources
favor of
and
the-
time.
Field
done.
trip approval form, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right. Omnia Partners Resolution.
Board Policy 2.005 allows the board to join cooperative purchasing agreements with other government entities in order to take advantage of lower prices for bulk purchasing and to reduce the cost involved in bidding for the benefit of the system. Under the law, a school district may participate in this master agreement if they adopt a resolution accepting the terms of the agreement. We are seeking approval for the attached resolution, which would authorize the district to procure goods and services pursuant to and in accordance with the terms and conditions made available through Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Program. By approving this resolution, Murfreesboro City Schools will be able to take advantage of Omnia Partners to procure future purchases. Specifically, what we're looking at purchasing immediately or begin to look at purchasing under this cooperative agreement is some playground equipment that we're looking to replace, specifically at Mitchell-Nilsson Elementary, and some resurfacing. And by adopting this, that will be the immediate need that we're looking to fill, but of course we'll be able to do future purchases from this agreement as well.
We have a motion to approve the partnership.
So moved.
Ms. Goff and Mr. Ballard, thank you very much. All in favor, any question or comment? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right. Jaytheon email.
Yes, sir. Our current product for email archiving has increased their annual renewal for the second year, taking our renewal price past our budgeted amount. In lieu of doing a budget amendment to cover the additional cost, our technology staff has identified the Jaytheon product as an alternative. This provides the same service and actually has some more extensive features. Jaytheon offers a 5-year agreement of $108,000 payable annually for $21,600. This price is actually $24,000 less annually than our current product. They will also migrate our data from our current vendor at no cost to the district. Because this is a multi-year contract, we're seeking approval from the board, and I will gladly say that Ms. Zavisa is here to answer any questions regarding email archiving, but we are recommending approval.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Now, any question or comment?
Makes all the sense in the world.
So we didn't have a contract deadline with our other company?
No, they would not do a contract.
Okay.
They would only do it by release. Releases, so we do not have a contract. It was a year to year.
All right. Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, reports and information. Review of expenditure report for the month of June.
Good evening, Board, Mr. Shacklet.
Good evening.
And first, may I say to Ms. Barton and Ms. Goff how much I appreciate working with both of you, and you've offered wonderful questions and lots of great guidance, and I just appreciate your service over my short tenure. So, thank you. The financials before you on the first page is a summary of the year-to-date revenues, $93 million, versus the year-to-date expenditures, $90 million, with some additional funds expected to go into our unassigned fund balance. These are not final numbers. We are still in the process of closing out the fiscal year. We are very close. State deadline is August 31st, so we do well under short deadlines. And we will close out all of our funds and all of our state reporting. There will be additional revenues that we have not recognized yet for fiscal year 22, so I anticipate the fund balance to be comparable to this number that you see in front of you, just under $3 million. We do have some reserve adjustments we're still working on. And again, the biggest increase over budget has been our property taxes and our sales tax. We did get additional money from the state BEP for our growth funds, just a little over $300,000. $300,000 is a lot of money to us. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Ms. Williams? Thank you, ma'am, again for a wonderful report.
Thank you.
Summer feeding report.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
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 Good evening, ma'am.
This past summer, we had the pleasure of doing our summer feeding program. In addition to our 4 summer school locations, we served 14 other locations. And that included the locations that the Chow Bus covered and the Sprout Bus, plus other brick and mortar. We were able to serve a little over 42,000 meals in the month of June and July. So we are gradually getting back out there with our buses and seeing more of our kids. So hopefully next year we'll be able to get the other 2 buses out running also.
Excellent.
Thank you, ma'am. That's a wonderful service.
Absolutely.
It just shows how much it's needed.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
Yeah,
Very much so.
absolutely.
We thank you and your staff for doing it.
Got to take care of our babies.
Thank you
So-
for that. Thank you for that.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, if I might add, I'd just commend Sandy and her team for once again pulling off 42,000 meals.
I don't know.
We continue to look at staffing shortages, food scarcity, trouble getting supplies and materials in. So I just want to publicly again thank Sandy for her hard work with that.
Thank you, Sandy. You're my hero.
School opening update?
Yes, sir. Wanted to provide 2 updates listed on the agenda for school opening. I'm going to actually jump down to the second one that says a review of the district's organizational chart, and that's in your packet. And I just wanted to point out we've obviously had a few staff changes with some new budgeted positions and so on. So we have updated that district organizational chart for the board to have. But I wanted to specifically talk about our enrollment update. At our work session a few weeks ago, we were, I think, on day 3 of the school year. So on the screen in front of you, you'll see our enrollment numbers of where we are as of yesterday compared to where we ended the year. And I'm going to kind of walk through this very briefly. You will see we ended the year with 8,711 kindergarten through 6th grade general education students. And as of yesterday, we're at 8,655. We are still enrolling kids on a regular basis, and that will happen throughout the next week or so as families continue to join. So actually right now, we are sitting right under 56 of where we ended the school year last year. As the board's aware, we did some rezoning last year to help address some severe overcrowding. We looked closely at our zone waiver process, and so the fact that we are with our K-6 very close to where we ended the year is what we had anticipated. Our VPK numbers, which are voluntary pre-K, you will see we are down 59 students there. And as a reminder, again, as we were looking at our buildings, we did pause 3 of our VPK classes last year that were those additional ones that we were funding 100% out of district funds and not out of grant money. So that's where that drop is, because we had paused those classes until we were clear on where we had room and funds to add those back. Our integrated pre-K is currently down 52, but that's just who we have enrolled, and I think Ms. Fairchild is here, and she will continue to tell us that we are screening kids for our special education preschool. That number will definitely go up dramatically here in the next couple weeks. I do want to point out our CDC numbers, which is our Tier 5 and our most severe and profound special ed students. This is the second year in a row we're seeing a pretty strong increase from the previous year, that we've increased that population by 15. During our work session, we did have that short voting meeting beforehand where we voted on that budget amendment to add a few more CDC teachers. And again, here is why we continue to see that population of students grow in our district. Of course, we're pairing that with that is some of the hardest staff to fill. But Ms. Fairchild and her team are working tremendously hard to do that, and we have those positions filled at this time. Our best program, of course, is our behavior students. That drop is from graduating 6th graders. We had a fairly large number of 6th graders that moved on, and again, my anticipation is that that number will quickly grow as well. So overall, you can see we're at right now 9,274 students enrolled in the district, which is down 146 from where we left off at the end of last year. My guess, especially on the west side, where we see the most growth happening in those buildings, which is of course where we move students out of, is where we'll continue to see growth as homes continue to shoot up in the overall Salem and Scales area. very much so. But I will say currently when we look at some key points, again, they're still early. We expect these to continue increase. Right now, all of our schools are below their projections, with the exception of Case and Lane, which is actually 84 students above what we projected them at. At the work session, Mr. Richardson asked for a comparison of enrollment versus what we projected. In your packet tonight, the third tab actually shows that. And for each school, it gives 3 numbers. It gives where we ended the school year, what we projected them to be at, and then where we are as of August 22nd for you to have some comparisons there. But again, growth at Case and Lane continues to be more than expected. 6 of our schools, their enrollment are above where they ended last year, and the other ones are either right at it or slightly below. The schools where our numbers have gone down a little bit are our inner core schools. Reeves-Rogers has gone down slightly, and some other schools are slightly below where they were last year. And as I said, we know we will continue to gain our IPK students, and we are actually anticipating, based on what we're hearing from other districts coming in, more of our CDC students to be added as well. So I wanted to provide this update of where we are. Of course, beginning next month, Mr. Marlin will give his monthly enrollment updates to the board regarding where we are as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. Any question, Ms. Barton?
A comment and a question. One, it's great that right now we have so many schools that are not overcrowded, because it will happen. So that's a good thing. I mean, I'm not, I know you're worried about numbers, but I'm not. You know they're going to come.
Yes, I will say we are at capacity. Let me be.
Right.
We're glad
But
to
you're
not be
not
overcrowded, but we are definitely at
Yes.
capacity.
Well, there have been other times that we started with several of us overcrowded, so. And also, about the CDC, and you may not be able to answer this right off the top of your head, is it because of kindergartners coming in, or is it people moving here from other systems?
I'm going to let Ms. Fairchild come to the podium
I'm
and
just
answer
curious.
that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we've had a large number of transfer students
Okay.
this year. A lot of them are the younger ones, and several of them have never been to school. So we're seeing that now due to COVID.
Several of them have what?
We have several transfer students who have not been to school at all. They're in first grade, second grade, and never been to school.
Because they may be medically fragile.
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah, that was my question, was that increase, but
Yeah.
I'm so confident in y'all's ability to handle it. I mean, I know you don't sleep a lot, but
We have a great team.
yeah,
We have a
you
great
really
team.
do.
Our schools are very dedicated to
Absolutely.
our students with disabilities, so we're
Thank
very
you.
proud of that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may, with the new positions that have been funded for the CDC children, do we feel comfortable with what we're able to provide, or is that something we need to reevaluate at the end of the semester?
You mean as far as staff?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're currently staffed now, but at the end of every school year, we think we're staffed, and then by the time school starts, people have left, so it is a very hard to fill position. So we're confident now, but it's always going to be a hard to fill position.
Very well. Thank you very much.
I will add, Ms. Fairchild keeps, we meet pretty regularly with Ms. Johnson as well, specifically not so much as teaching staff as educational assistants. Many times we have students that come to the building and we discover they need some more one-on-one support. And so we're always looking at our staff, and there may be times we have to look and say we need to add an additional staff member for a one-on-one in this building. The goal is always short-term, right? That we don't want that long-term support with that student, but to help that student so we can wean that service off. But Ms. Fairchild is wonderful with working with the principals to help identify those needs, and then working with myself and HR to help fill those needs.
And I will say, our schools are very dedicated to using their own staff at first before we hire, just to see what the needs actually are. So
we're talking about just pulling EAs from other areas possibly, or some after-school care? When you say they're using their own, like?
Within their own building. And then if we have to hire, we hire.
Yeah,
We don't have
yeah.
as much trouble getting the EAs as we do the teachers.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Dr. Duke, I would just say with the numbers looking as they are, it would be something I would hope that we would reevaluate mid-year rather than at the end of the year.
And I think he talked about that at the work session. We would like to look at that, because the past 2 years that's happened to us. we thought we were full and then we weren't.
To go back to something we approved earlier tonight was our capital improvement. We talked about the need for a new school. We could currently, as we think about, okay, well, our number is stable right now where we are compared to where we were at the end of last year. We're very stable. That's not typical for us. I mean, again, last year we grew over 5% during the school year. But why we need that school specifically on the west side is we know I could pull today 250 students from Overall Creek, 250 students from Salem, and 250 students from Scales, move all of them to a new school, have a school of over 700 students, and still leave those 3 schools with over 700 students and never add 1 student for growth. And again, it doesn't take much but driving down Veterans Parkway to know that we're going to need that much sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Ms. Moore?
On the new TISA formula that may be coming, or is coming in a year, I know there's possible funds for growth, and I think we had been looking forward to that as something that would help us with what we faced the past few years. When is that calculation done? And as far as...
And I'll have to get with you the exact answer. Typically, that's done, I believe, October 1. Kim, do you know? I will find that out, the exact date of that calculation for sure.
Okay. I just didn't know if this was how much we get into the school year before we say this is our number of students for the year to compare to last year.
Sure, and that's something I had also considered when I see specifically when we look at how much we grew last year and the year before and the year before. Again, if you look at our last 5 years, the average, we have grown 2.99%, not including this year, we have grown 2.99% every year as our average. So that is well above the standard in TISA, which is 1.25%. We will continue to look at that, and I'll find that exact date for you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our review of the district organizational chart.
Yes, sir. As I mentioned, that's just in your packet for the board to review as they need.
Okay. All right, director's update.
Yes, sir. The couple things I would like to say regarding the update tonight, which is, and I'll start with congratulations. We did receive word that both Ms. Barton and Ms. Goff will also have increased their boardsmanship level with TSBA, which will be recognized at the fall conference, even though they will not be there at the fall conference. So we do want to say that. And I hope Ms. Moore will be there because she has also gone up a level in her boardsmanship. And so congratulations to all 3 of them. So we want to say that. What I wanted to update the board on tonight was something that we have talked about really through some emails and through some conversations at some workshops, which is the new requirement regarding the 3rd grade retention law. And I really wanted us to have a conversation today to update both the board and the public on where we are as a district with this and what we've done to help make sure our parents are prepared. So to recap, as we know, in January of 2021, the Tennessee General Assembly passed the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act. And this was in the height after the first year of COVID. It was actually during the special session they did. And so there was a whole lot going on at that time. The major components of the law was, first, it established the summer camp programs to help address COVID-related learning opportunity losses. We have done those summer camp programs the last 2 years, have had great success with that. That has always been optional. And again, we've been really proud of our numbers. The first year with over 1,600 students enrolled in that camp, and last year with over 800 students enrolled in that camp. The second component of this law was the update to 3rd grade retention. Specifically, what the law says is beginning in the 22-23 school year, which would be our current 3rd graders, if a student scores below or approaching on the ELA portion of the 3rd grade TCAP, they shall not be promoted to the 4th grade unless they meet certain criteria. So this is a very kind of line in the sand that the General Assembly has drawn. Now, what those exceptions to the law would be first, if it's a student with a disability and that disability impacts their ability to read, they would be able to be promoted. If it's a student that's an English language learner who's had less than 2 years of English instruction, they would be promoted. If that student has been previously retained in kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade, they would be eligible, or if they score proficient on a retake test. And we are still waiting on some additional guidance from the state on what exactly that retake test, but it would not be a district test, it would be a state retake test. So those students would be exempt from that. Realistically, that's not a very high number of students in our district that would fall in that category. So if you do not meet one of the exceptions and you're an approaching student that attends the summer learning camp, to be promoted, you would have to attend the summer learning camp with 90% participation through that camp, or the family could choose to participate in a year-long tutoring program during 4th grade. If you're a student who falls in the lowest level of 3rd grade achievement, which is below, the requirement to be promoted would be to attend the summer camp with 90% attendance and participate in the year-long tutoring program for 4th grade. So those would be the ways, and we've worked really hard to help explain this to parents, because as I'll continue to go through this presentation, under the current law, there is little to no wiggle room for school districts. The law says you shall be retained, and we would have to tell parents, if you choose not to do summer camp, if you choose not to do tutoring, we would have to retain you. So one of the things, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I wanted to ask it before it left, and I don't retain. The summer camp that's required in order for me to get out of being retained, that's a free, right?
Yes, sir. We provide that.
We provide that, transportation, the whole nine, kind of like we're doing in summer school now.
Yes, sir. So it really is the same summer school program we're doing now, except it would move for those students from being optional if your family wanted to attend to a requirement for promotion if that's the avenue they chose.
So kind of like having to go to summer school. Okay, I understand.
So one of the things, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask about the tutoring.
Yes.
So do they provide their own tutoring? Does the school?
We would provide that as a school system, and the requirement for that is high dosage, low ratio. So to meet the requirement, it actually has to be no more than a 1-to-3 ratio, at least 3 times a week for those students. And that is spelled out both in the law and in the state board rules that were just passed. So right now, we have, as the board is aware, we've hired, I think 20, I think is the exact number, of what we're calling our all-core EAs that we approved in the budget to address the Tier 1 intervention help. And so we could use that staff to help meet that need. I will say right now that staff's being paid for out of a grant for this year and next year, which would be the first year of the law. After that, we would need to look at absorbing those costs to help make sure we could provide those tutoring programs. But it will definitely take people to make this work.
And there's not a retake requirement after the tutoring or the summer school?
So no, there is
There's no
not. There is a retake you can do as an option to not be retained and not have to go to summer school, but there is not a requirement after you've gone through that.
So the presumption is after I go through 90% of summer school, I'm good to go.
So I think the intent of the General Assembly, and I want to be careful, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think the intent would be to make sure that we're providing additional supports who are not reading at grade level on 3rd grade. I do want to clarify, and you've heard me say this a lot, proficiency on TCAP is not reading on grade level, and I think that's a message we need to clearly and loudly preach, that we have many students who are in that approaching category that can absolutely read on grade level. But that is what the General Assembly has laid as that metric, and at the end of the day, what this law says is promotion is based on one test that happens on one day in 3rd grade.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we're not there yet, but when you say that, I just have to jump in. This is still something else that the state is trying to mandate that should be a local decision. They don't know these kids, they don't know these families, they don't know these parents. There could be all kinds of reasons for a bad test score that may not reflect how they perform throughout the rest of the year. So, and it's not funded, of course, as usual. So, I don't know. I would like to see us do something. I don't know exactly what. I know we're not really supposed to break the law. But I'm not on the board anymore, so it doesn't matter. But anything that we could do to just say, we don't like that. We don't want that to happen.
Ms. Goff?
Maybe we can invite who our legislator is on the education committee. I was looking right now to see if Charlie Baum is still, maybe they need to come and explain it. We're not going to be here but we need to be able to voice our opinion to who is representing us and voting these laws into place.
Well, Williamson County has done this. They've drafted a resolution to send that message that this is it's not good for our kids, and that's something we could consider as well.
And we're happy to prepare that if the board's will is to have a resolution. And I'll be clear, I think the intent is to make sure our students who are not performing at proficiency receive those extra additional supports, and that's something we're committed to in Murfreesboro City anyway. But I do think there are going to be, this is going to impact a large number of students in our district, and we're ahead of the state average. Now, again, my job right now is, of course, is to make sure we take care of Murfreesboro City, and that's what we're going to do. But I think about the impact it's going to have on us, and we're above the state average for proficiency. Yes, right. So it's going to have a real ripple effect. I do want to say we have worked really hard and been very proactive as a district to make sure we're communicating to families about this, because first and foremost, we know this is not something that can take families by surprise. And on your screen, you'll see a couple things that we've already done to help make sure our families are aware of this requirement. First, we did send a letter which was emailed to all third grade families on the first full day of school to say, we know at the beginning of the school year we have a lot of parent eyes on us. And so we took that advantage and say, let's make sure our families understand this is the third grade retention law that is in place, and that if not changed is in effect. Ms. Trail and I also released an informational video to kind of help walk the parents through that law to understand the requirements. During classroom room nights, again, we actually asked our classroom teachers to distribute that same letter to all third grade families, make sure they actually handed it to them. So we emailed it to them, we handed it to them. And then the last thing we did is we looked at second grade, because we do the second grade assessment, and students who fell below that proficiency mark in second grade, we did an individualized letter to those families to make sure they were aware that, because those are our students who at this point may be most at risk of retention. So when I think about kind of our next steps, the state board has released the final rules that will govern the implementation of this law, and we've reviewed those. The Department of Education is also slated to release a guidebook to assist districts around communication. Again, we've been very proactive in trying to communicate early to families on this. We will continue to prioritize communication to families around their child's progress and intervention opportunities. Again, we put a lot of emphasis on intervention in our district. And for instance, right now our students are taking their beginning of the year benchmarks. That, I think, we'll be done with that on Friday. The time frame, we'll actually look at students who are flagging as possibly students who may need additional support, and we're going to start communicating to parents throughout the years. They've heard from us at the beginning. After every benchmark period, they will hear from us. And again, our emphasis is we're going to continue to do everything we can to provide the intervention needs of our students. And we're going to make sure our students are taken care of, and we're going to work hard, as we always do, to grow our students academically. But we also want to prioritize the last bullet, that communication around the law. First and foremost, currently it is a legal requirement. This has been signed and it is in place. The other thing I want to point out is around the appeal process. Parents can appeal this law, but to go back to the role of the local schools in this decision, under the state board rules, they cannot appeal that to the school. So if they have to appeal that directly to the State Department. So again, this is one of my concerns with the law, even though I think the intent is to make sure we provide supports. At the end of the day, the classroom, as Ms. Barton said, the classroom teacher and the school principal who have historically made these decisions and know that child and that student well will not be able to appeal it based on how they perform on that one test on that one day. So I wanted to make sure, again, that the board knew the proactive stance we were taking in communicating this to families, and to make sure they understand. We are at a place where, of course, the General Assembly does come back in January. Even though the law's in place, they will return in January. And as Ms. Moore mentioned, if it's the will of the board, we're happy to have Ms. Taylor draft a resolution that the board can review if that's something that is the will of the
So
board.
moved.
Have a second.
Second.
All in favor, aye, we do it.
Yours, but
Ms. Taylor, can you do that?
Absolutely.
All right.
And we'll bring that back to the board in September for review.
Dr. Duke, I do have a question on part of the law. Is the appeals process already outlined? In other words, I'm always very leery of appeals when it comes to the state, because to me, I think it's kind of like we have to do this or we will, but we already know what we're going to do. So do we know what the appeals process looks like? Will the local teacher, will the local principal be able to speak on behalf of that student at the appeals, or are they simply going to be looking at something on paper? That's my concern, because when you say an appeal, and I know this is, I know that doesn't matter, but when you say an appeal to a parent, they don't. It's daunting to have an appeal at the school board level, local school board level. A second grade, third grade parent to come to central office to appeal a decision is a big thing. Then to ask that parent to go to the State Board of Education to appeal, it's almost Herculean, because it's overwhelming, it's daunting, it's intimidating. So I'm interested in knowing what that process looked like. I'm also interested, because I just don't know, and I'm sure Elizabeth does, who the brilliant mind was that came up with this. Who was the authors of this? Do we know? And do we know how our legislators did on this, Becky?
No, but I'm Googling Dr. Google right now.
I will say, as far as the appeal process, that's outlined in the state board rules that were just passed. And I say the department, and I want to be clear, to my knowledge, it's not the State Board of Ed, it's to the Department of Ed.
Okay, sorry.
Specifically a designee, but at the same time, the law does specifically say that parents have the right to appeal and not a principal on behalf of that parent or a teacher on behalf of that parent. Like I said earlier, we are expecting the department to release a guidebook here in the next coming weeks. I've had the opportunity to review a draft of that guidebook. I know they were making some changes once the state board rules were final, but I do know the appeals process as a whole will be outlined in that guidebook, and in September I'll be happy to report on that.
So we'll have that in September to be able to. Since it's going to happen, at least we would have some tools on hand to kind of assist our parents if it comes to that.
Well, we need to tell our parents too, because I've already had several ask me about it that so wonderfully we're told about it in room meetings. They need to contact their representatives as parents of third graders and say that they don't agree with this at all, that something's got to change.
You know, we have had for the last several years a meeting with our legislators.
Sorry.
And at every meeting, they encourage us to contact. But also in every meeting, we encourage them to please contact us about things that are coming up. Now, I'll have to go and say, how many of you have been contacted about this issue from a legislator?
Nope.
That's what I thought. Now, being very careful, because you know what retaliation is. And sometimes I think that happens. But I cannot understand, do other departments in the state of Tennessee suffer the same way that education does with decisions by legislators?
Wow.
Nobody can answer that.
Who do you want to answer that?
But that's a good question, because it is almost as if, to kind of piggyback on something Roseanne said earlier, it's not so much that as it is the appearance that we're not trusted to make the best decisions for the kids in our area.
Bingo.
In which we all ran for election. None of us applied and all of that. We ran for the office, and it is proven that our citizens trust us to make decisions. However, the state seems increasingly interested in running our schools from the state legislator and from that perch rather than at the local level where we really see what the stuff happens, you know?
You remember 2 years ago, when we as a board sent a letter to the State Department saying we did not want to give the second half of the TCAP test? And you remember what the response was?
Yeah.
You don't have to give it, but you won't get your state funding if you don't. They got you.
Well, that's why parents need to do something. I'm sorry, Amanda.
That's okay. I just have some questions. I think, first of all, it's just important to just clarify. We're all frustrated with this, but I just want to be clear. It's not that we don't support the idea of academic achievement for our third graders. It's not that. It's just, once again, this is just another rigid law that's being placed upon us that doesn't allow for this flexibility. Of course, we all want to see our kids be proficient.
Well, I would feel a lot better about the law being passed if any of us had been contacted prior to the vote.
Agreed. And one thing I just want to ask about, though, I think city schools, we do a better job than a lot of districts on diagnosing and screening for dyslexia at an early age. But I just think about how many kids by third grade still have not been diagnosed.
Formally diagnosed.
So I know we have the exception for kids who have a disability that impacts their ability to read, but how many kids have that but have not received that official diagnosis yet, so are going to be caught in this for a disability that they have. So I just want to flag that as well. It's a concern.
And I appreciate you asking that. And I had a meeting on Friday with the State Department regarding this as well. And that was an exact question I asked. And I actually have several Murfreesboro City parents that have reached out to me whose student may not have an IEP, but does definitely have characteristics of dyslexia and therefore is in our Tier 3 program or so on. And the message we received on Friday is the state is aware of that, and that in the guidebook and in the state, through the state process, there will be a way to identify students with those characteristics of dyslexia, and if they're on a formal improvement plan, then they would be able to be promoted. I will say I didn't speak to that specifically tonight because I have not seen that in-state writing to speak to it, but we were told that the state is aware of that. And again, it's a question I asked specifically in the meeting because we've had parents asking about our students who have characteristics of dyslexia, and they assure me that there will be an avenue for promotion for those students.
Which, you know what that means, Ms. Fairchild? It means that all parents will be trying to get their child certified for special ed before third grade.
Well, that leads to my other question, which is, I'm thinking about across the state, we're looking at what, like 60% of kids who fall into this, and I'm thinking of the sheer numbers of tutors, summer school teachers. Is this a funded mandate? Is there extra money coming with this to handle the?
I don't think there is.
So under the new TISA funding formula, there are some direct allocations that come, and one of the direct allocations that do come is an allocation per fourth grade student who wasn't proficient in third grade. So there is a direct allocation piece to it as we look at that new funding. I asked the question specifically at my meeting, is the intent that is the funding that would be used to help address this need? And the answer I received was yes.
But the way it's worded, for every fourth grader.
Well, that's for your summer school,
Right.
to get
You
them
see
to
what I'm
fourth
saying?
grade, and they're,
I don't know, I don't trust it.
So there is an allocation specifically for, a direct allocation specifically for upcoming fourth graders or current fourth graders who were not at that.
Do we know how much it is? Because I know that was one of our concerns with TISA, is the answer for future questions is it's baked in the formula, but we don't know what the dollar is.
I will go back and check. I will speak to say, I believe it's $500 per student, but I will get you an exact number on that.
Is that sufficient? I don't.
So we have not done a budget on that. I will say that. So
Thinking about all these for.
And think about doing a budget for a number we don't have yet, one. And think about teachers in fourth grade that all of a sudden we don't have enough students for.
They're now third grade teachers.
And we have a
whole hall of third grade teachers.
It's just a headache waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I really thought we had moved past this whole mandatory retention. They did that when I was in school. I didn't know that was, this is just like a flashback. You know, I told you the 80s were hard on me, man.
And I will emphasize again, I know I've said this, but I do think the intent was to make sure we're providing additional supports to students. And again, we're going to always prioritize that in Murfreesboro City. At the end of the day, it is my belief, and I think, well, I won't speak for the board, but I think these decisions are best made up. And as Ms. Moore said, we're not saying we're not for third grade proficiency. We want that. We know we have a goal in this district of 66% of our students within the next 5 years. Again, we just came out of a year where we saw the highest ELA achievement levels we have seen since the change in standards. We are moving that needle when it comes to reading in this district. We want to continue to move that needle. We want to continue to prioritize that, and we're going to do that. But we also want to make sure that it's the right people at the table when you're making a decision as big as retaining a child. And the impact that has, we want to make sure it's the right people at the table, and we believe that that's at the local level.
Is that it?
Those are all my updates, Mr. Chair.
Well, I think your update has built a fire. More places than one. I do want to welcome tonight Ms. Bratton and also Ms. Maxwell from the county board. We're glad to have you. Come back anytime. Welcome. Ms. Barton?
I had asked just to say a couple of things. Becky may want to as well, but I just want to thank my colleagues for the last 4 years. I want to thank our central office, who's done such a great job in answering all my questions, because I know I have a lot. Dr. Duke, I feel so good about you being the head of our system. I can't even describe. And the teachers and the principals that kept me informed and helped me make decisions based on what they were telling me. And of course, the voting public for voting me in for 4 years. I've definitely enjoyed it. It's bittersweet for me. I love Murfreesboro City Schools. I always will. And if there's anything I can ever do, and no, Lisa Terrell, don't ask me to do anything. Please let me know. Thank you.
Would you, anything you can do, would you like to take it on yourself to contact legislators?
Well, I'll do that anyway.
I know you will. I know you will. All right. Ms. Goff?
Yes, I agree with Roseanne. It's been an honor to serve with all of my colleagues here on the board, and I do want to thank Murfreesboro City Schools for giving me this opportunity to serve on the city school board. I really appreciate the leadership of Dr. Duke and Dr. Gilbert and Ralph when he stepped up to the plate when we really needed him. And I'm so proud that we were able to keep our school system, our school district on track and didn't let the train fall off, I guess. And so it has been a difficult time, but I really appreciate the teachers. I'm so thankful for the teachers that have stuck with us and stuck with this career and our students, because they're invaluable to our district. And so it's been an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity. And my husband's here tonight. He's retired, and tonight's my last night, so some new adventures are ahead of us.
Yes.
So thank you.
Well, we certainly do appreciate both of you and the service that you've given and the comments that you have made and everything that goes along with it. We will miss you.
Absolutely.
We have two very capable ladies coming in to sit in your behalf. So if there's anything we can do and you know we need to know, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Oh, I'll let you know.
I know you will. Okay. All right, anything else coming before this board tonight? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Suttles. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Good
Let's go
night.
home.
Good night.